Hello and welcome. It's so good to see you. We are here to talk to you all about postural care and why postural care needs to be something that you're passionate about. You might not be as passionate as the person I'm just about to introduce you to because she is slightly obsessed, but we hope that you're going to be a little bit more excited than you were just before you started about postural care. But the most passionate person about postural care that I know, if there could be any more P's in that sentence, it would be amazing, is Sarah Clayton.
Hello. I love that whole thing. As soon as you say postural care, and I've just got this image of people going, oh, I'll just sit myself up a little bit taller. The whole postural care thing is not about sit up straight. Hopefully we'll get a little bit more information today and a little bit more across about the idea that this is, I think the whole posture thing's got such a bad press, hasn't it? You know, it all sounds a little bit, yeah, you're not doing X, Y, Z. So you are right, I am a bit obsessed. It started years and years and years ago. My mum calls herself a recovering physiotherapist, worked in a huge institution, and literally says that she had people from from children right the way through, and a massive privilege for her, the position she was in. She could see the way that people's bodies change shape over time. My dad was a weapons and explosives specialist in the army, I know.
So useful.
But an engineer. So he ended up thinking about equipment. And so I've grown up in this house where my body symmetry has been measured more times than I'd like to admit. I've been put into prototypes of chairs and night positioning and all of these things. So yeah, I admit it, I'm a fully fledged member of the postural care
Cult.
massive. Yeah. What about you, Rachel?
So I could never talk about postural care ever again in my whole life, quite happily, because I
Nice to
was
have you
one of
here.
those people who was thinking that postural care was like this, and the beads in the back of your car, your big fancy brown beads from the 80s, or your desk, whether you got one of those height adjustable desks or whatever. And that was until despite being a nurse, it was only until my son was born, who has got really complex needs. 16 years ago he was born, and suddenly, well, actually not suddenly, it kind of dawns on you a little bit. Postural care isn't like he's got a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, or he's registered blind, or he's needs to have support with feeding. It's so much more of a dawning. But then it's a little bit like yeast. It gets into everything and it changes everything. So I couldn't just put him into a chair and that was his postural care done. And then I couldn't just put him in a stander because that was his postural care done. There were so many components because it's not at a certain moment in time. In the same way, gravity's there 24 hours a day. My son's muscular patterns and the impact of his complexities are there 24/7, and
Yeah.
therefore the postural care and the support that's required is 24/7. So I live and breathe it in my life, and I love Sarah enough to still talk about it when I could be drinking tea and eating cake instead.
There you go. And we are absolutely delighted that you have decided to hang around and stay because your name is on the title. And it would have been uncomfortable. So the postural care stuff is really badly defined, isn't it? People kind of don't necessarily know what it is. It's that if someone finds it difficult to move, then we need to be providing support 24 hours a day in order to protect them from the predictable effect of gravity. So just that squashing, constant squashing. It's also to do with mobility. And we know that because it's not very well defined, because it covers loads of different practitioners, it seems everybody's got a little bit of responsibility around it. It's really difficult, and service provision, we know, and we'll talk about a little bit later, has been massively impacted by COVID, but it was also tricky beforehand. So we've got a lot of work to do, but that's okay because we're kind of like that, aren't we? Parents of, so I forgot to say, I'm a wife of one, mum of 4, and my oldest has a complex brain injury. And if you want something doing, ask a parent of a child or a young person or an adult with disability, because I guarantee you
They're as persistent as gravity.
they'll get more done. Yeah, exactly. They'll get more done in less time than anybody else.
But the reality is for families like us is that despite it being 2020, despite us living in a very affluent part of the country, world even comparatively, there still are big gaps in the provision that's given for postural care. Whether or not you get a wheelchair, what that wheelchair's like, do you get it funded with vouchers, do you get it assessed and given exactly what you need, do you have to wait 3 months for it or 3 years for it, as it was reported earlier, not that long ago, on the BBC News cycle. It's unfortunate that despite postural care being the platform on which people with limited movement and complex disabilities accesses the rest of their life, from education to the outside world to fun to socializing, all those things are accessed through the capacity and the ability for them to be given good postural care and their bodies being protected for the future. Despite that, our services are very are piecemeal, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I know that my responsibility as somebody who provides postural care for my son all the time can feel overwhelming and relentless and really, really tricky. Like it's lots and lots of different people, it's lots and lots of different bits of equipment, it's lots of things to coordinate, and then you have the crises that end up in hospital because things haven't been done and things haven't been put in place. And I realized that responsibility of mine is not just actually down to me. Being empowered, I hear that around a lot, like, I've empowered the parents to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you said is, you said it's not your job. But it isn't. Everybody's working really, really hard. And the way in which we do empower responsibility, whether that's a parent or the practitioner or the manager or whatever else, is to enable those people to have the authority, the agency, and the resources with which to do it. We've all gone into work and thought, oh, I've got too much to do today and my computer's not working. Like, how am I going to get my job done because my computer's not working? I can't, as a parent of a child with complex needs, provide good postural care if I don't have the authority to make decisions about how that's done, if I haven't got the understanding or the training or the knowledge with which to know what good looks like, or I haven't got the equipment. I haven't got the time or the energy in order to provide good care. There probably isn't anything more in my son's life than postural care that requires the level of collaboration and communication that is needed.
Yeah.
And if it's neglected, or not even neglected, if it isn't run well, if it isn't coordinated, if it isn't resourced, if I haven't got the capacity and the authority and the agency and all this stuff I talked about with regards to empowerment, then unfortunately, if we think about postural care as all the P's, the fact that it's a pathway to life, it's the pathway to a really passionate life, but we have to be proactive and we have to be person-centered and protective. It's got to be really practical with equipment as well as people, that it's perpetual, it just doesn't stop. Then unfortunately the final P when you're thinking about postural care is, without it being put in place with care and attention and collaboration and financed, then it can lead to premature death. And the results from LEADER in 2019 was clear that over 40% of people die of an associated respiratory condition. And that has to in part be related to the posture and the differences in people's body shape when services aren't put in place. And there is Brené Brown talks about clear is kind, and that's true for families like mine. This premature death thing is not what we want to hear, but it's kinder to us to tell us the reality of what might happen to our children's lives and enable us to change our future.
I think one of the things, though, Rachel, around that idea of premature death is that there can be a sense of inevitability because the evidence is there that chest infections, so pneumonia and aspiration pneumonia, more than 40% of premature deaths of people with learning disabilities in 2019 were those two causes. And we know that positioning has a huge impact. But one of the things that we need to be really aware of is that this is not inevitable. And like you say, that clear is kind, because it gives people a really good understanding of their roles and responsibilities about how we are going to avoid this car crash. When you think of the crash test dummy, I think back, and if you think of crash test dummy, remember the videos of the 70s and watching the crash test dummy and thinking about when we were young, you didn't even have seatbelts in the back of the car. So those education programs, this is what happens without this intervention, helps people to see, right, okay, so I see that it's a really serious consequence, but I see that there is a way through. And that's something that really came about, didn't it, when we did the Posture Positive report. So Rachel and I were commissioned by NHS England to look at the impact of COVID on postural care services.
Go to my website and look at that document. It's all about standardisation, coordination and collaboration. That's what came out. What came out is that we need to decide what good looks like and agree that between us. We need to work together and coordinate services so that families know what to expect, when to expect it and things. And we've got to collaborate as people within that system to make things happen. We worked out what is it that we need to do? What is it that we can do to make the reality of this agency authority resources, how can we put that into the hands of people who need it? And so we have developed training for practitioners, training for families and the workforce. And obviously I work really hard and do training and stuff on communication and co-production. We've got the Cradle to Grave course, which is for those people who have been trained in postural care or have training in biomechanics and things like that. We will take you the whole way through. So if you haven't got a lot of background, but you want to get this level of knowledge, it is absolutely possible. We'll go through all the jargon, the lingo and all that kind of stuff. But that's for people to really get to grips with how do you transform your practice so that you're bringing about really positive change for people who have postural care needs. Then there's the workforce training, which is for those hands-on people. The hands-on training is like a workshop. So you've got 1 hour a week of watching videos. You've got 1 hour a week of doing some activities together. And that will enable you to hopefully become an alarm system for that person that you support, to know when something needs to do and when to get those other people in to make changes and support, but also to be able to do that stuff thinking, yep, that person's in a good position in bed. Or, oh, it's not, I'll get someone else who might be able to help. And then there's the family, like, we're training families, we're training parents like me, siblings, grandparents have been on the course. Because if we are loving our people, we want to do it as best as we can. And if anybody deserves the knowledge, the skills and the confidence for postural care, it's the people that do it the most. And that is the people who are doing it on Christmas Day and New Year's Day and bank holidays and weekends, and that's those families, those parents. So what are you going to do now? We've given you these different opportunities to train, to equip yourselves. Sarah and I did the Posture Positive report and we decided what next, and we decided the next right thing was to develop these courses. And we just want to inspire you to decide what the next right thing is for you. Is it to head over to the website and read the Posture Positive report? Is it to go and grab a piece of cake? Is it to lie down and have a nap? Or is it to book yourself onto one of the training courses? Whatever your next right thing is, you can find me, Rachel, on bornattherighttime.com, which is where you'll find out all the information on our training courses. You can find Sarah over at simplestuffworks.co.uk, and both of us pop into Posture Positive on Facebook. Whatever you're doing, we hope we bump into you very soon.